Hi guys, all right, here we go again. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about converting units. So this is continuing on with your physics notes. So throughout the physics unit, we're going to be working with a lot of different units of measurement. This could be meters, this could be kilometers, we could be talking about hours, distance, etc. Now, oftentimes you may have to convert units, which means converting is about changing from one set of units to another. Now, to do this, we may need a conversion factor. Now, this is simply a ratio where you have kind of two equivalent numbers that are equivalent in value, but represent different units. So let's say, for example, time. If I say 1 hour is equivalent to 60 minutes, that's a conversion factor. It's a ratio where the two values we know are technically numerically equal, but they're at different units. Another example would be 1 kilometer over 1,000 meters. Again, I know these two things, they actually mean the exact same distance, but they're different units. So the reason we would need a conversion factor is if we're asked to represent a number in a different unit, but we don't want to actually change the value of the number. Okay. First, we need to start with distance. We need to be familiar with the metric system. So when we're talking about distance in Canada, we use the metric system, which means we use meters, kilometers, centimeters, etc. We have to know kind of what's known as the metric staircase, which is this here. This shows our metric units and kind of how they relate to one another. So on this side, up at the kilo, those are going to be larger units, which means the numbers that represent them are actually smaller. Millimeter is a really tiny, tiny, tiny unit. So the numbers that represent them are going to be very large. This base in the center here, that can be used to represent meters, liters, or grams. Those are part of kind of our metric system. So meters would be kind of in the middle, and then we would, if we're going up, it would be decameters, hectometers, kilometers, or liters. It could be kiloliters, hectoliters, and same with grams. We're typically, in this physics unit, going to be dealing with meters. So some examples then of conversion factors on the left here are, again, equivalent values that are numerically equal but show different units. So 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. So let's see what that would look like. If I have 1,000 meters here, all right, and I have to get all the way up to kilometer, I'm going up the staircase or left 1, 2, 3 steps. Now I move the decimal 1, 2, 3 steps, which gives me 1.00 kilometers. So if you memorize or remember this kind of metric staircase, you can use it for easy distance conversions. Let's say, for example, I have 24 hectometers, and I want to know how many centimeters that is. So I have to figure out how many steps I'm taking. I'm taking 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to the right. I move the decimal to the right that many steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. So a quick way to know that 24 hectometers would be equal to 240,000 centimeters. Okay, 100 centimeters to meters, left 2 times, left 2 times. 1,000 millimeters to meters, left 3 times, left 3 times. Okay, so if you are capable of remembering this staircase, which I highly recommend, you can then easily convert distances by however many times. If you have to move left, you move the decimal left that many times. If you have to move right, you move the decimal right that many times. So I would recommend remembering this down here. Okay, you can come up with some sort of acronym. There's many out there. And again, this M is just kind of our base unit. Now, that's just distance. We're also often going to be dealing with time in physics when we're talking about kilometers per hour or meters per second. So time does not follow the metric system. So we have to kind of just know some of these conversions. So we know 1 year is 365 days. 1 day, 24 hours. 1 hour, 60 minutes. 1 minute, 60 seconds. And often we're going to have to convert. Oh, this is actually wrong. It's 3,600. Often we're going to have to convert between hours and seconds. So there is actually 3,600 seconds in 1 hour. All right. So how do we convert then from one unit to another? First example here, converting 36 kilometers to meters. Now, there's two ways to do this. If you're only dealing with distance, you can go the short way using the distance conversion factor. So if I remembered my metric staircase, I'm just going to jot it out here. Okay, so method 1 is remembering that staircase. If I have to go from kilometers to meters, that means I have to go right 1, 2, 3 times. Therefore, I would move my decimal 1, 2, 3 times. Okay, that's method number 1, and it will work many times for distance. But it's very important that you also know the longer method as we move ourselves forward into more complicated conversion factors. So how it would work, step 1, you would write the information from the question as a fraction and putting any value over 1 if needed. Number 2, determine the conversion factor you need, which means you need to between the two units, kilometers and meters, we need to come up with an equivalent conversion factor. So you have to know some of these conversion factors. So we would need to know that there's 1,000 meters in a kilometer. Okay, and I would write that as a fraction. All right. Step 3, set up to multiply your fractions, but make sure the same units are diagonal so that they cancel. So if you know anything about multiplying fractions, if the same units here, or the same kind of number, is diagonal across from each other, we can actually cancel those units. And then we multiply out the fractions and cancel anything. All right, so how does this look? Step 1 was right here. Writing out my number as a fraction, so 36 kilometers, but I put it over 1 because there was no other number. Step 2 was to write out, or kind of determine my conversion factor, and write it out as a fraction. Step 3 was to make sure that my fractions were written up so that my units that I want to get rid of are across from each other. Then I multiply. 1,000 times 36 is 36,000, and 1 times 1 is nothing. And my unit that I'm left with is 36,000 meters. So notice how method 1 and method 2 got us the same answer. Obviously, method 1 was much easier, but we're going to have to be familiar with method 2 as we move forward. Okay, I'm going to move on now. Again, this becomes easier when you do more practice. So let's do a couple examples. I'm converting from meters to centimeters. First, I'm going to write out my metric staircase. So that's kilo, hecta, deca, meters, deci, centi, and milli. Sorry, I'm just going to separate those a little bit. All right. Number 1, it's just distance. I can use my metric staircase. I'm going from meters to centimeters. Make sure you're moving in the right direction. Meters to centimeters. So 2 steps to the right. Therefore, my decimal moves 2 steps to the right. Answer becomes 120 centimeters. Okay, 35 minutes to seconds. Now I want to show you this one using the proper conversion factor. So first, step 1, write your number as a fraction. 35 minutes over 1. Next, I have to figure out my conversion factor. So my conversion factor here is that I know that 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds. Again, the idea between a conversion factor is figuring out, with the 2 units you have involved, how do you make them equivalent? And you're always better off to make the larger unit just equal to 1 and figure out how many of the smaller unit equal that. Okay, so I know that 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds, but I also have to make sure that the minute goes on the bottom of my next fraction so that my minutes can cancel. So that's why I know that this fraction has to be written as 60 seconds over a minute instead of the other way around. Now I simply multiply and cancel the units that are diagonal from each other if they're the same. So this leaves me with 35 times 60 divided by 1 is 2100 seconds. Okay, going to be very important that we can do this. All right, next one is hours to seconds. Start by writing your number over 1 as a fraction. Figure out your conversion factor. If we think back to the time conversions, we know that 1 hour is equal to 3600 seconds. Now I've set it up as a multiplying fraction. I know that hours has to be written on the bottom in order to be diagonal from my original. So 1 hour, therefore that leaves 3600 seconds to be on the top. Now I'm simply left to actually multiply, so 4.5 times 3600 seconds, and I cancel my units where I can. That leaves me with 16,200 seconds. Okay, last one here, kilometers to meters. Again, I could use my distance conversion just with the scale above, but I'm going to show you the other way. Start by writing your number, so 2.29 kilometers, and I write it as a fraction. Kilometers is the larger unit. I know my conversion factor, that 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. Okay, these two conversion factors here, you need to just know by memory. Okay, we got to be comfortable with that. I know I have to have kilometers on the bottom in order for it to be diagonal from my original. That leaves my 1,000 meters on the top. Okay, my kilometers cancel. I'm left to simply multiply, which leaves me with 2,290 meters. Very important that your answer does in fact have the new unit written as well. Okay. All right. Now we've been doing all kind of one-step conversions. Very often in this unit, we are going to have to do two-step conversions because we're going to be converting both distance and time. So for example, meters per second to kilometers per hour. So to do this, it's the exact same, but you simply have two conversion factors, all right? You have to make sure that in order to cancel the units, that their conversion factors are set up so that the units you want to get rid of are across from each other. And it doesn't matter what order these two fractions go in, okay? Multiplication order does not matter. So my hours that are kind of two steps across from each other, they still cancel. So in this example, I'm going from 60 kilometers per hour into meters per second. Step 1 is to write your original number as a fraction. That's why I've gone 60 kilometers over 1 hour. Then you set up your conversion factors, which are often going to be that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters, and that 1 hour is equal to 3,600 seconds. And then depending on, you figure out which one is on the top of the fraction or the bottom based on the form of your original number. Because my original number has 60 kilometers on top, that tells me my kilometer needs to be on the bottom to cancel. And because my hour is on the bottom, then in my conversion factor needs to be on the top. Okay, then I would be left to multiply. So you're doing kind of 3 multiplication here. You'd go 60 times 1,000 times 1, and then you would also multiply out 1 times 3,600. This would give you 60,000 divided by 3,600, and you would do that as well. And that's going to give you 16.6, and my units I'm left with are meters per second. Okay, these ones take a lot of practice, so make sure you are following the examples and doing all of the practice. All right, let's do another example. If I was asked to convert between 14 kilometers per hour to meters per second, start by writing your number as a fraction. 14 kilometers over 1 hour. Okay, per hour means 1 hour. Set up your two conversion factors. I know that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters, and I know that 1 hour is equal to 3,600 seconds. Okay, it doesn't matter which one comes first. I'm going to start with my distance, kilometers and meters. With my conversion factor, because kilometer is on the top of this fraction, it needs to be on the bottom of my conversion factor to be able to cancel, which leaves 1,000 meters at the top. With time, my hour is at the bottom, which means my hour has to be at the top over here in order to be able to cancel. Okay, now I double check and I cancel my units where appropriate. So I can cancel kilometers, I can cancel hours, which has left me with meters per second. Good. Now I do the math. 14 times 1,000 times 1 divided by 1 times 1 times 3,600. This is going to be 14,000 if I multiply out all the tops, divided by 3,600, and that's going to leave me with 3.8 meters per second. Okay, we have one more example to do. Hopefully you're following along here. All right, start by writing your number as a fraction, 25 meters per 1 second. Okay, I know the same conversion factors, but this time meters needs to be on the bottom. So it's 1,000 meters, and I'm converting to kilometers, so my kilometer goes on top. Okay, this time seconds needs to be on the top, hours on the bottom. Cancel my units where I can. Keep in mind you're only canceling the units, not the numbers that go along with them. Okay, that leaves me with 25 times 1 times 3,600 divided by 1 times 1,000 times 1. And that's going to give me, sorry, I just have to calculate this one quickly. 25 times 3,600. That's 90,000 up at the top. And divided by 1,000, which makes my final answer 90 kilometers per hour. Okay. All right, that's all I have for you today. So you should be continuing on with your workbook. Really make sure you're doing the practice. You're going to be doing questions number 3 and 4. Thanks. Bye.